Hey everybody, here's an old dead HP Asus motherboard. It's model P5LP-E. It's an Intel 775 motherboard that takes DDR2. And I've had this board for quite a while. It was brought in with a computer. The computer that I was in was not starting. Turns out the power supply was okay, just needs some new capacitors, but this motherboard would not start with any power supply used. So I had to replace the motherboard in that computer. And of course, like I say, this is the old motherboard for that computer. And one thing I noticed not long after removing the motherboard from the machine was that there is some discoloration around the MOSFETs. You can kind of see it on top of the motherboard, but it really shows up on the bottom. And of course, we got some MOSFETs here and some actually facing against the board here. And I just want to show you all why I do not like motherboards that do not have heatsink cooling on their MOSFETs. I mean motherboards that accept higher end CPUs but don't have cooling on their MOSFETs. Here's what can happen. Now of course, I don't think the MOSFETs were the cause of failure with this board. But just have a look at this. If you notice, you can probably see some discoloration around these MOSFETs here. The ones that stick up. These are mainly the ones that had the most discoloration on the PCB. It kind of depends on how the light shines against the board, but you can kind of see the discoloration. It's not too good. And in some newer motherboards, especially MSI boards that take socket AM3 CPUs from AMD. For example, one board I used to use in my computer is a MSI. I'm trying to remember the model. It is a. I got the box right here. Let me pull it out. 870A G54, and I've done some reviewing on the internet about that motherboard, and turns out they market the board as military class, which is really just a load of crap. And I'll go ahead and pull the board out so you can see. So like I said, I got the box right here. I'm going to pull this board out so you can have a look. And this motherboard, this MSI board, does not have any heatsink cooling on its MOSFETs, even though it is rated for 125 watt CPU and can support the 6-core CPUs from AMD. Let's go ahead and pull this board out and have a look. Which, to be honest with you, it is a nice looking motherboard. And the reason why it looks so nice is because it is black and has some blue on it. I'm just going to pull this out and have a look. Okay, here's the board. Here's my Zalman heatsink. That's actually an aftermarket cooler. I installed that when I got this board. But it is a MSI 870A G54. It's an AMD 870 chipset board. Takes a socket AM3 CPU. Has 4 DDR3 DIMM slots. Can take up to 2 graphics cards. One in 16, and the other I think in a lower speed. Here's some MOSFETs on this motherboard. Notice no heatsink cooling. And there's 5 chokes here. And from my understanding about the newer AMD motherboards, they either have a 4+1 phase design or a 8+2 phase. This is a 4+1, which is not recommended for 125 watt CPUs. My newer ASRock motherboard in my computer right now is a 8+2, which is much better and has active cooling over the MOSFETs. But just have a look here. No cooling whatsoever. And like I said, I've done some looking online about this motherboard. This is after, of course, I already got the board in my machine. And I've actually heard reports of these motherboards, MOSFETs, actually failing with a stock 6-core Thuban CPU. No kidding, with a stock 6-core. The VRMs would fail. So, I mean, just want to share with you all. why having active cooling on your MOSFETs and having a good MOSFET design is crucial for your motherboard. I'm still going to use this board, but I'm going to try to do some modifications to it. I still have my Phenom 2 965 CPU installed on it, because when I upgraded my system, I went straight from this motherboard to a new motherboard with the AMD 8-core CPU, which I think is doing much better than this setup ever did. Now let me explain exactly what I'm going to be doing here. I plucked these heat sinks off of an older MSI motherboard. I gotta clean the stuff off the bottom of them though. But I've got some thermal adhesive somewhere in here. I just gotta find it that I ordered. That I can stick to the bottom of these heat sinks and affix them to the MOSFETs. Now, of course, this won't work perfect. But it will help improve the cooling. For example, this is how they would look. I just set them on top of the MOSFETs with the thermal adhesive all the way down through here. Anyways, you get the idea. So long story short, MOSFET cooling and MOSFET design is a very important part of a reliable PC motherboard. If your MOSFETs aren't properly designed in a good fashion, such as this MSI board only having a 4+1 phase for a very power demanding CPU, and or not having proper cooling on the MOSFETs, failure can happen a lot easier. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask.